What's up guys, I'm Robin and I make stuff, and today we are going to paint, that was dumb. Today we're gonna paint trees. Not just any kind of tree, evergreen trees. Christmas tree. Oh, Christmas tree, oh. I'm on a roll today. Now they're not just like a little cone shape. That was like so first grade. Can we just stop doing that now? I'm gonna take you through my process for painting background, middle ground, and foreground when it comes to an evergreen forest. If you think this video is awesome, I love that. Please like and subscribe. It helps me and it helps other people. So let's just stop talking about trees and let's paint some trees. A tree trunk. If you're standing on top of it looking straight down, the branches are going to come out all around this tree, right? So they're coming out here, 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 all the way around. They're not just going this side, that side, that side. But so many of us draw trees like this. Here's my tree trunk. And then I've got a branch and a branch. There's my tree. Do not do that. Other people I've seen, they'll do really, really thick and leave a gap in between, right? So it's like this and like this. But it starts to look like a cell tower. We're not doing them like this either. We are not doing trees that look like this. This is a no, that's a no. If you're looking straight down on top of a tree, you're gonna be seeing, let's just say, a circle like this. You're gonna see branches going like this. All the way down, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can't even tell where they start anymore. It's like a flower. That's what a tree looks like from the top. Does not look like this. These are all the branches going all the way down, all the way down. No, it doesn't. Or it doesn't look like this. When you have a tree, it's going to be really skinny at the top, and it's going to come down, and it's going to have a base that's thicker at the bottom. And as these branches come out, they're going to be smaller at the top, and then you have ones that are behind, and those might be a little bit shorter. And then you might skip a few spots, and then there's a bigger one, and then there's a shorter one, another bigger one. Then maybe there's just a couple of dead branches, and these all have pine needles on them, twigs at the top that haven't really grown out fully yet. But as they start to get bigger, you also have branches that are coming straight out this way, right? And so because of that, you'll see pine needles kind of come across the whole thing. And then maybe you have one kind of coming down like this. And then maybe there's a clump of them right here, and it's hard to tell where the branches actually start. As they get bigger, they get heavier, and they all try to grow up to the sun. Here's the sun. Yo, bro. I'm the sun. All these branches are trying to like make their way to the sun. And you've got some bigger ones now that are kind of coming across. And then bigger ones here. You've got some in the back, and they might be a little foreshortened. It starts to be less about the trunk that you're seeing and more about these clumps of tree pine needles. And they're kind of going up, and then they get real heavy. You know, or there's a dead one here and a dead one there. We don't know what happened to those ones. It was a sad day. We don't talk about it. Then as it gets bigger, you start to have less seeing through of the trunk and each branch. It starts to just kind of fill in, especially when there's more trees. You know, you got another tree over here, and then those branches start to mix in, and then all of a sudden you've just got a whole bunch of branches all joined together, and you can't really see the forest through the trees. And then as they make their cone shape up, they start to have more definition as they get to the top. But as I'm kind of squiggling and you're watching me squiggle, this is the same kind of motion that I want my paintbrush to have as it's dancing on the paper. Just squiggly and letting it just kind of dance and do its thing and play around. So slow motion might be looking like this, where it's just flat and then the tip of it and then flattened and, you know, doing some interesting things. The other thing to consider is how far back are the trees in the background and how close up are the trees in the foreground. The trees that are in the background want to be lighter, and the trees that are closer up are going to be darker and have more detail. We also need to take into consideration where the sun is. It's going to be casting light down like this, which then underneath here makes these bottoms of these branches much darker because that sun is casting its rays on top and creating shadow underneath. As we get down closer to the forest floor, it starts to get really dark down in here. So you can see how that's starting to look more like a tree versus something like this. Yeah, there are trees that look like that, but we're going for something a lot more loose. Let's paint it. I'm gonna start by wetting my paper, so the tops of the trees will kind of be up in this area, and then I want it to hit that water and just fade itself out. I want it to paint itself. So I'm just gonna come in here with some water, and I wanna make sure it's nice and wet. So you can see, nice and wet in there. I want this little tiny script liner or a rigger brush that has a nice long bristle to it and very fine, so not a lot of bristles in here. I want to use something like this. It doesn't necessarily matter. We could do orange if we wanted to, but I have this. I'm going to mix a lot of water into it because I want it to be lighter. You can tell it's a very light color because when I move it, the color you're seeing is the plate underneath, right? So you can just tell it has a lot of water. These don't have to have a lot of detail, just kind of the idea. This brush doesn't hold a ton of paint, but watch when it gets to the water, which is right about here. I want to bring that paint all the way down to that edge. I'm just kind of tapping it and I'm letting it do its own thing. And I want to have a lot of trees back in this background. And remember, as they get fuller and they start to hit other trees, it's going to be a lot harder for you to see through to the next tree. So we don't want it to have a lot of detail. We just want to give the idea that there are some trees back here. And then when it hits that water, it's softening and doing its own thing. Fantastic. These are going to dry a lot lighter than what it looks like. Typically that's what happens with watercolor, is it dries lighter. Just kind of dancing my brush across quickly. A little tiny line at the top, and then I start kind of dancing back and forth. This jabbing motion of sorts, and then as it gets closer, I just get my paint and dab it into that water. So maybe there's less detail and just some ideas of, some trees just with some lines. But it's got to hit that water, kind of soften up a little bit in there. I don't want to have a nice straight line across here, so I'm playing with that a little bit. I can even come up into here and kind of bring that up just a little bit so it doesn't feel so straight across that. You can see that I'm just dabbing, right? I'm not doing a lot of like sweeping motions like that at all. It's just dabbing and letting the watercolor hit the water and seeing what it's going to do with that. Need to come in and do, something a little bit bigger. Just letting that paintbrush dance, jump across the paper, not worrying about it too much. There's no such thing as a perfect tree. Constantly adding water to my palette and to my paper here. There we go, there's our background. We have some that have a little more detail. We have some that are just some faint little lines and pokes and things like that. We have one kind of bigger one over here it's got some great texture to it. We're going to come in and do a little bit darker color over tops of these, but they're gonna be bigger than those, right? So these trees are in the background and we want them to be smaller. And then as we get closer, the trees are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's okay that we paint over these. We want there to be a background layer. And notice I'm not doing a big line for my tree trunk at all. Painting over these trees that I just painted in there, I'm doing that on purpose. I want those to fade into the background for these trees in the front to kind of go over them. Now you can see this feels like it's in the front. Now let's do one that has a trunk so you can see the difference of what that looks like. Nice skinny little trunk. Just start with a few little dots. My eye can connect those. I'm going across the whole thing. I do some just on the left, maybe a gap, one on the right, a bigger one over here, little tiny dots. And then they get thicker as we start to go down and kind of fill in that trunk. Now it's connecting to that tree, which is what I want it to do. I don't want it to be, you know, side by side and there's a space all the way in between. That's not realistic. Now my paper is dried up. It's great because it's now creating this nice sharp edge on these tree branches here, which allows it to communicate that there's more detail. If I want to soften that up, there's a couple ways I can do that. I can just add some water without going back into my paint here and letting that just kind of soften in there. I can also take my paper towel and dab a few areas of that and let it soften. But I kind of like that. I might actually just add a little more paint to that, just dabbing it. Not painting it, not sweeping it, just dabbing and letting the watercolor do that work for me. You can see now these definitely feel like they're in front of those trees in the back. Let's do a couple more over in here. They're not as tall. Let's try it and see what it looks like. There's a lot of water in here, not a lot of detail. I'm gonna actually put some water down in here now that it's dried. So that way when it hits that, it will soften. There it goes. Just dabbing. Just dabbing, dabbing, dabbing. Back and forth. Like it's dancing. You can develop whatever technique you want for your trees. This is kind of what I do just so that it feels a little asymmetrical. Not perfect, because again, trees are not perfect. And maybe there's some more back in here. Just the tops of the trees. We've got a background, a middle ground, and we got a foreground. So this is where I want to do nice dark trees. Ultramarine blue and burnt sienna are the two colors I use the most. I enjoy mixing colors. I find that challenge kind of fun. And I think that it's important to be able to know how to use the most basic colors and get almost any color you want. And I want this to be a lot more opaque. It's gonna be a nice big tree. So I'm gonna do a little bit more detail on this one. You know, have it come down like this, and maybe I'll do more of that trunk. It's got some water in there, that's good. It's just kind of doing my crisscross. As I get into this a little bit more, using the pressure and flattening my brush a little bit can help add some interesting texture and kind of fill that in. Pushing more on your brush gives a little bit wider stroke. Maybe there's some branches. You can really feel that this one's different, closer, it's darker, a little more detail, and it's starting to hit that water, which I'm kind of okay with. I'm kind of gonna just see what happens. And as it fills in at the bottom, you don't have a lot of detail down there. Now if I make another one, there's a lot of paint on that. Just kind of letting it dance back and forth in this kind of sweeping motion. So you start to get the sense that these are much closer trees. These are right behind that. This one's probably in between those. And then those are way off in the distance. It's something that you just practice, and you have to be kind of loose with it and being open to just seeing what your brush will do and what the watercolor will do if you let it. And that's the key, just letting it. Do another one over here, create a little bit of an edge on this page so when we take the tape off it looks cool. take the tape off. Well, there you go. There's some trees. Thanks for hanging out while we painted trees. I hope that you learned something. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time that I make stuff.